Hello and welcome to Comic Drake, where I talk about comic books and my name is Drake. I have been an absolute manga fanatic for most of my life. Anime and manga has been a huge passion of mine growing up when I started watching Toonami, and I've gone to all sorts of anime conventions and I used to be really into cosplaying. But over the years, I've really gotten into American comics, and I really want to take a look today at why there seems to be such a huge disconnect between the two, and why American comics really don't sell all that many physical copies, even though superhero movies are some of the biggest things in pop culture around the entire world. And yet their Japanese counterparts seem to be outselling them just pretty much every single time, and that's even including here in America. And if you really think about it, manga and American comics are the exact same thing. And I know a lot of weebs are gonna go, no they're not, they're completely separate things. Listen, they're both comics. Just like how JRPGs are still video games, even though the J in JRPG stands for Japanese. They are still video games, and manga are still comics. You can fight me on the semantics all you want, but that's just how I'm gonna be looking at things. Anyway, today I want to take a look at some of the things that the American comic book industry can learn from their Japanese counterparts. And maybe I can get you guys that are here just because you want to hear me talk about manga interested in getting started in American comics as well. One of the main detractions that I hear from people who don't want to get into American comics is that they are just really convoluted and very long running. I completely understand the frustration with wanting to read Spider-Man, but feeling like you have to read Amazing Spider-Man and Spectacular Spider-Man. And oh, Spidey's over here doing a group crossover with this guy. And oh my god, Spider-Man's also in this giant crossover event. It seems really daunting whenever you just want to read the one story. And if we're gonna be honest, the Marvel movies are getting that way too. It seems like you have to watch all of these films just to get the actual narrative of the most recent one. But manga doesn't actually have that problem because typically you just read chapter 1 or pick up volume 1 and you just read forward. It's one story from start to finish under one title. I completely get how much more accessible manga is. And I think that that's very, very fascinating. Now you're gonna hear me talk about this a lot in this video, but the indie comic scene is really starting to fill that niche that the big two publishers of superhero comics aren't really filling right now. It's really hard to want to get into a story and feel like you have to read everything else. And yeah, sometimes in manga there's supplemental material, but that's really not always necessary. Manga can even have these giant, expansive casts of characters, and they all have this deep lore and all this backstory. But at the end of the day, you pretty much only need to read one series from start to finish in order to get it all. And also typically in manga, it's the same writer from beginning to end. Sometimes American comics can switch writers seemingly at the drop of a hat. You can be in the middle of a storyline and suddenly the writer or the artist is completely different, and that can be very jarring from a visual art perspective, but also it's really interesting how a character's motivation in American comics can seemingly just switch. Sometimes you have a person who writes a book for a long time and they really get to a good point with this character. But then you have a new writer that says, let's just undo everything that just happened. This is my Daredevil. I get it. It's very, very frustrating. Also, manga typically has longer lasting consequences when it comes to their story arcs. As in, if somebody dies, they're not always going to be brought back right away. With the exception of Dragon Ball. I mean, let's be honest, I feel like Dragon Ball characters come back just as much, if not more so, than American comic characters. But you're able to see these characters progress and grow. And in American comics, they seem to always go back to a status quo. And that's because comic book characters are meant to go on and on and on and never end. Now granted, it seems like some manga will never end, kind of like One Piece, but I don't think it's actually designed to be that way. You're able to see some very long-running stories, but they're pretty much always going to have an end. There's never going to be an end of Batman, and there's never going to be an end of Superman or Iron Man or Thor. Even if these characters die, they're going to come back. Even if, we'll go back to Batman, if we thought that Bruce Wayne was going to stop being Batman, he's not going to pass it on to another character, he's just going to come back. Every single time that Bruce has left, he's always come back. And that's because that's just how it is. Manga, no matter how long it runs, is eventually going to come to a stopping point. The only thing that'll really stop DC or Marvel or if the entire industry fails. American comic book characters are typically meant to be multimedia icons. They're meant to be in TV shows, cartoons, movies, video games, etc. And they're always meant to bring back readers to the comics so they can make more stuff to base more things on. They're meant to be self-perpetuating in that case. But because of that, characters will always need to revert back to a status quo. All these big superheroes are eventually going to need to go back to some level of familiarity. Yes, at some points you're going to see new additions and you're going to see some subtle changes to characters, but at the end of the day, Spider-Man is going to go back to being the quippy guy from Queens who's going around thwip-thwipping on all the people. You're not going to really see a lot of changes in characters. They're going to always kill off Aunt May, but she's always going to come back. Or if you're DC, you're just going to keep rebooting your universe over and over and over and over and over again to continue to stay relevant. Manga doesn't do that. Manga eventually ends, and even though you see manga characters just all over everything when it comes to merchandise, all good things must come to an end. Typically when a manga series ends, it feels like the writer is finally getting to say what they wanted to say. It's been their story from the beginning, and very seldom are you going to have another writer take over a story like that. I really like that sense of finality that some things have, because in my opinion, you can't truly appreciate something until it's done and you have time to think about it and for time to go by. But comics are always going to stay relevant. They're always going to keep going. You can look back on different stories and stuff, but you're never really going to see a character die off or retire for a long-term bit. You get exceptions here and there, but not really. Another thing that's really interesting about American comics is that they seem more episodic than manga, which is really weird because it seems like pretty much every single manga series is getting adapted into an anime. Every single day I'm seeing like, oh Drake, you need to watch this anime, and this anime, and this anime, and this anime, and they're getting just cranked out like crazy. But this is where things get interesting, tying back into our previous points, is that a lot of American comics seem very monster of the week, villain of the week, situation of the week, kind of pulp style, episodic things, because they're always going to go back to the status quo that we talked about. But manga, since it's going to end up telling an entire story, every single chapter, every single episode of an anime really feels like it's building onto a larger narrative. And I think that is very, very fascinating. You get these arcs that they work their way into each other, and again, they have these lasting consequences in manga, and you're able to tell these big, epic themes overall. And yes, I feel like you get that in American comics, typically with one writer's time with a book, but never to the extent that manga has. There's always going to be Mark Waid's Daredevil. That feels like a solid beginning to end story, even though technically it would pick up in the middle of Daredevil's career. Regardless, you can see where Mark Waid was going with the character, and you can see the ups and the downs before it eventually reverts back to the status quo. I really, really, really like how manga is able to tell these complete narratives. But another big thing is that manga seems to have more genres than American comics. Now, contrary to what a lot of people might think, cape comics, which are superhero comics, aren't the only genre out there. You have horror and sci-fi and westerns, and even in the big two publishers, you are able to see some varying degrees of genre. Like you have your Jonah Hex being westerns, you have your Zatannas and your Doctor Stranges and stuff for the occult and sci-fi and horror and all that stuff. But it's still labeled under the umbrella of superhero comics, but the semantics of what actually is a superhero is another conversation for another day. When it comes to manga series, you have all your big battle, superhero-esque anime of shonen, but you're also able to get slices of life. You're able to get horror. You're able to get just straight up silly, goofy comedy stuff. And yes, all of these different genres are starting to get more popular in American comics, mainly with indie publishers, but you're not really seeing the big two, Marvel and DC, venture into this foray. It's typically just, hey, this guy's good at punching things, let's continue to do that because it makes money. And also these characters have been around since the freaking 40s. And yes, this entire video has been really ranty and rambly, and I've been all over the place with things, but let me just quickly break it back down to what I mainly think that the American comic book industry could learn from manga. And again, the indie scene is really, really, really starting to pick up on a lot of this. I think we need to see less dependency on the big interconnected multiverse and work on telling smaller personal stories with characters from beginning to end that the reader can relate to. Make it to where the numbering system is easy. Don't start at issue 565. Just start at issue 1, and just keep telling things up to that point. Just keep going. Make it obvious to readers where they can start. It's always going to be obvious. Hey, you want to read this book? Look, it has a big old number 1 on it. And then the next one's going to be number 2, and number 3, and number 4. Just keep it going, and if it gets too big, just stop and tell another story. It doesn't need to go on forever. Let characters have actual growth. Don't just keep reverting them back to the status quo because you want to sell more toys, because you want new readers who are going to be coming in 20, 30 years to eventually get to enjoy the same character. While I do love that part of storytelling, it makes it very, very, very difficult for a lot of readers because they feel like they have to keep up with everything, even though they really don't have to. I feel like we need to let writers stay on books for a longer time. Now, we don't need to do a Dan Slott and let him on Spider-Man for seemingly forever, but don't just shift writers in the middle of an arc. Let them have a time. Let them be a Mark Waid and stay with a book for a definite amount of time. Let them tell the story that they want to tell. And when it's done, don't just wipe the slate clean and start over. Let characters have some sort of growth. And tell more genres of stories. Oh my god, I love Cape Comics to death, but that's not the only thing that needs to sell. There's a reason why the indie books have been taking off. It's because they have the freedom to tell new types of stories. Fans want them. Marvel, DC, tell more genres. You can put them in the same goddamn universe. Give me more Jonah Hexes, give me more magic shit, give me more this and that. Tell more than just superhero books, for the love of God, or at least help differentiate them. Don't let it all just be the same generic stuff that we see time and time again. I love American comics, and I feel like they are very inaccessible. And I really think that's why manga has started to take off over the past few decades. It makes so much sense why this is popular. And yes, manga does have its unique traits that is very distinctly it that attracts some people for that. But at the same time, I really feel like we have great stories in the American scene that can definitely use new eyes. Learn what you can from your competitors and from your neighbors overseas, and try to make something good for everybody. This video has been super ranty and super rambly. I understand, I don't have a script. I am very, very sorry. But if you feel like you want to get into American comics and you don't really know where to start, then this is what this channel is about. It's all about giving you guys information and history so you don't have to comb through all that stuff, and we give you good reading recommendations. So why not consider watching another video and learning some more for yourself? It's a great industry, and I really want you to enjoy it with me. As always, these videos would not be possible without my amazing supporters over on Patreon. Badasses like Yehoshua Flores, Nate Kiellach, Bonnie Davies, Ashley Donson, and Billy Lewis. You guys make this possible. Thank you so much. And you can see even more names of our supporters down there in the description below. But again, thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this, and hopefully, I'll see you next time.